Okay, so in this video, we will be reviewing the all-new Apple iPad. This is the latest in the regular iPad line and the successor to this guy right here, the iPad 9. So let's go ahead and jump in. Okay, full disclosure here, I actually shot the regular video, but I ran into some technical difficulties with the audio, so I'm doing more of a voiceover, the regular video that I already shot. Anyway, I've gotten the opportunity to play with this machine here a little longer than typical, right? And what that means is that we're just gonna use that as an opportunity to go a little bit more in depth, right, in this video here. Especially because this particular tablet is kind of an interesting one. You know, it almost sits between the regular iPad and the iPad Air, right? So the regular iPad line and the iPad Air line. One of the biggest additions that make it that way is just the fact that it costs $450, right? So it's definitely not a regular iPad, but it's also not an iPad Air. But we'll dive into that in a moment. Let's go ahead and start off with the design here, right? And for those of you, who are familiar with this particular lineup, you will immediately notice a drastic change in design. Again, I'm talking about the lineup, the iPad lineup, the regular iPad lineup. So you will notice that drastic design change here that make it join the rest of the family in terms of just like the shape, the size, the bezels, and all that good stuff. In fact, it goes a little bit further with a couple of things that are added to this particular model here that are not available on the other ones. And we are now looking at an even larger display when compared to the previous one, the iPad 9, right? So here we are looking at a 10.9 inches display. Now, Apple essentially got rid of the thick bezels that we were so accustomed to seeing, and all of that made for an 80.5% screen to body ratio as opposed to the previous about 70% screen to body ratio on the iPad 9. And this is actually a nice segue into covering the display, right? We actually are looking at that same liquid, Retina IPS LCD, the same one found on the previous one on the Apple iPad 9th generation with that same 500 nits of brightness. So still pretty bright tablet for sure. The resolution also is higher here. However, we are looking at the 1640 by 2360 in terms of pixels. So even with that, the iPad 9 or the previous version finds itself a tiny bit more PPI dense at 265 instead of the 264 that you get here. But obviously you will not be able to notice that difference. So it comes down to saying that to the naked eye, there is no difference in terms of sharpness. So the newest one has a larger display, but remains just as sharp as what we had on the iPad 9. Now I do have to add that at a glance, even though you have that 500 nits, it still appears to be a tiny bit brighter than the iPad 9, but that could just be me. Now, one of the things that I had been hoping for on this particular tablet on the newer iPad was a laminated display, but it looks like on this one, on the 10th gen, you still get a non-laminated display. But I do want to specify that it doesn't seem to affect the user experience as the non-laminated display that you had on the iPad 9 or the 8 or the 7 and so forth, right? So even though it's still non-laminated, it's not laminated, it just feels different. It actually looks as if it is laminated. Now that being said, entertainment has been pretty enjoyable on here, right? For as long as I've been using it, like a good month and a half, it's been pretty nice, right? Again, still non-laminated, but pretty decent. In fact, even using the Apple Pencil first gen here shouldn't be too crazy. Now, some additional design changes worth mentioning here include, that fingerprint sensor. And to those of you familiar with Touch ID, it used to be located at the bottom of the bezel there. Now with the new iPad, with this particular iPad, you have it located literally at the same spot as what you have with the iPad Air, right? The iPad Air 4 or the iPad Air 5, right? At the top right there. It does work pretty well, and it just seems to be just as fast and secure as the one found in the previous one. And also, just like on the newer generation of iPad Air, this one actually combos as the power button and, like I said, to unlock the tablet. Another very important design change worth mentioning here would be the fact that the all-new iPad comes now with a USB Type-C port, right? Definitely a major move away from that crappy Lightning port that we've been accustomed to seeing for so many years. And now we are looking at a, relatively faster transfer along with a, with a port that's fairly standardized. Now, there's also a new camera on the back here. We're looking at a 12 megapixel main camera as opposed to the previous 8 megapixels that we had on the iPad now. So again, that is an upgrade there. Now the quality is pretty decent when it comes out to, pictures, videos. It's also pretty good to scan it with scanning documents and things like that. On the front here, you have that same 12 megapixel ultra wide camera, right? And it does support center stage, right? So that's always good to see. Lastly, and not least, of course, we will notice that the speakers are wearing a brand new look. We're looking at a quad speaker setup, right? So when you hold the tablet up like this, you'll still be able to get the sound coming out. That is really really a drastic difference when compared to the previous dual speaker setup that used to be at the bottom of the tablet, where you could easily cover and then the sound coming out would be muffled. Now, quickly brushing over things that are not new, of course, would be, one of the oldest features that we have here is that, Apple kept it compatible with the first generation of their stylus, right? So with the Apple Pencil first gen. And by the way, when purchasing yours, if you are planning on using a stylus, you will need to buy an adapter to charge your pencil. Otherwise, you won't even be able to connect your pencil to get your pencil to communicate with the tablet so that it can start working on it, right? So you have to buy that adapter, because if you remember, the pencil is an active pencil. It needs to be charged up and it needs to be connected wirelessly to the tablet, right? In order to communicate and be able to work on that tablet. I'm not sure why Apple is keeping the first gen stylus with this. They should have just, made this support the second generation Apple Pencil. Now, you also do have that same base, 64 gigs of internal storage. Next is going to be 256 gigs. As always, of course, this is not expandable, so you can only choose either or. Right now, let's go ahead and jump right into performance here. Covering additional specs and performance, the all new iPad is, as you would imagine, boasting a new chip. It's loaded with the A14 Bionic chip, right? That's also comboed with 4 gigs of RAM. So it looks like we are up 1 gig of RAM, from the previous 3 that we used to get from the previous generation. So 4 gigs of RAM, A14 Bionic chip. Performance has been excellent. Top notch. I think when it comes down to just Apple devices, it's almost redundant to talk about performance, because we all know that their chipsets, this Apple Silicon is always so freaking powerful, right? So when it comes down to just raw power, it got, you get it. It's super powerful, especially for something in this price range. Now, that doesn't mean that it's the best bet for you, that if you're looking for something budget that also performs very well, you should automatically go for an iPad. For this particular iPad, maybe you should consider the iPad Air, the Air 4 or the Air 5. But anyway, I digress. So pretty powerful tablet, especially given the price. But of course, when it comes down to productivity, as always, you are going to be limited with just, iPad OS, but you still be able to, do a lot of things, right? You'll still be able to have some stuff running in the background. Like I said, you get 4 gigs of RAM here. So I guess in summary here, in terms of performance, I have absolutely no complaints for what you pay for, $450, and the performance of this guy have not encountered any freezes, any stuttering, none of that. No applications has quit on me, so it's been pretty legit. Now, as I mentioned already, this tablet is compatible with the Apple Pencil, first gen, right? So you should still be expecting a user experience that's a tiny bit similar to that of the iPad 9, except, of course, the design is different here. Finally, of course, let's go ahead and quickly talk battery. It's been pretty good so far. Generally, Apple devices are good on, Apple tablets are pretty good, in terms of battery. The battery here has been pretty good. I've been seeing a full day without any issues. And of course, as always, it will depend on your type of usage, right? It's not particularly beyond what anyone expected, but definitely not below what, anyone expected. So far, I would say good battery. Now, with all of this being said, here's my take, right? So if you are in the market for this particular model, like this specific model, meaning you want the latest iPad from the iPad line, then go for it. However, if you are flexible in terms of buying a budget tablet, I would say stay away from this guy here, because I'm sure many other reviewers are gonna tell you the same thing, right? It's hard to tell where this one stands. It's as if Apple wasn't really sure what to make of it, right? So it's supposed to be from the regular lineup, but yet there's a big jump in terms of just price. So it almost makes sense for you to simply add a little bit more money and just go for the iPad Air, which is a more powerful tablet, right? You could go for the iPad Air 5, right? It's a more powerful tablet. You get a bit more stuff with that, when compared to this one. And on the other hand, if you're actually considering buying an iPad from the regular iPad lineup, maybe you should consider the iPad 9. That is, of course, assuming that you don't mind the old legacy look, right? So if you don't mind that, the iPad 9 is still a solid choice, right? It performs very well. It's going to be supported for a very long time, and you should essentially be able to do pretty much the same stuff that you would be able to do with this iPad here. So again, this is one of those devices that I would, ask for you to really think about what you are looking for in a tablet before you go and buy it. This is definitely not one that I would just immediately say, just go buy it. Nope, definitely not. In fact, even if you are stuck on wanting this tablet, I would still insist that you first, consider an iPad Air, right? Plus, the iPad Air is, compatible or does support the Apple Pencil 2nd Gen, and you get a better chipset. So these are some of the things that you should be considering. That was just my take, and I'm certainly hoping that this was informative and that it helps your purchasing decision. Let me know if you have any questions in the comment section. I'm always going to catch you in that comment section. Make sure to share the video, of course. Make sure to subscribe. Make sure to like if you haven't done so already. I will catch you in that comment section. Like I always do, I'm also going to catch you in the next video. Up until that next video, of course, as always, stay safe out there.